At 2 a.m., my stepbrother stabbed me with a screwdriver. Pain shot through my shoulder while my parents laughed and said, "Stop being dramatic." Blood poured down as I struggled to breathe. With my last bit of strength, I sent an SOS before everything went black. What happened next shook the entire courtroom. A quick, dramatic cut to a close-up of Kenya's determined, yet haunted eyes, then a shot of a Phillips head screwdriver glinting menacingly in dim light, followed by a sudden, jarring sound of a door splintering. There are moments in life that shatter everything you thought you knew, moments that carve a line so deep in your soul, you can never go back. For me, that line was drawn at 2 a.m. in a suffocating Texas summer, not on some distant battlefield, but right inside my own childhood bedroom. And it was etched there by the hands of my own stepbrother. My name is Kenya Mack. I was just 19, a private in the United States Army, when my entire world, the one I'd always tried so hard to belong to, was blown to pieces. It wasn't an enemy combatant who attacked me, it was Dylan, my stepbrother, his face twisted with alcohol and a hatred so potent it made the air crackle. He kicked the door open, a Phillips head screwdriver clutched in his hand. The thrust missed my face, thank God, but found its mark in my shoulder. I heard a sickening crack as it went straight through my right clavicle, pinning me to the wall like some grotesque trophy. The scream that tore from my throat was primal, raw, but the physical agony, as blinding as it was nothing compared to the gut-wrenching horror of what came next. My father, Thomas, and my stepmother, Evelyn, appeared in the shattered doorway. My eyes, wide with pain and terror, pleaded with them. "Please, help me. Save me." But they just stood there. And then Evelyn's voice, sickeningly sweet, cut through the night like a poisoned blade. "Oh, now Kenya, honey," she cooed, "don't be so dramatic." My father just sighed, a long, put-upon sound, as if I was the inconvenience. "Her brother's drunk," he muttered to Evelyn, not to me. She always did love the attention. And then they laughed. Can you believe that? They laughed. They had no idea that through the blinding pain, through the absolute, soul-crushing betrayal, my trembling left hand had already found my phone. And I'd sent 3 letters. 3 simple letters that would burn their fabricated world to ash. If family is supposed to be your safest harbor, what happens when it becomes the source of your deepest pain? Before that door crashed open, before my world devolved into splintered wood and sharp, blinding pain, there was a whisper. It slithered through the crack beneath my bedroom door, a venomous, drunken hiss from the hallway. "Think you're somebody now, huh, little soldier girl?" Dylan's voice was a slurry of cheap beer, probably the PBR he always favored, but the hatred in it was sharp enough to cut glass. "Come back here to show off?" I lay perfectly still on my bed, the thin cotton sheets sticking to my skin in the oppressive San Antonio heat. The ceiling fan above me did nothing but stir the soupy, humid air. My heart, though? It was a frantic drum against my ribs, a trapped bird beating itself against a cage. Every instinct, every ounce of my basic training, screamed at me, assess the threat. Identify egress routes. Neutralize. But this wasn't a training field. This was my childhood room, the one with the faded floral wallpaper. And the monster outside was my stepbrother. So, I did what the little girl inside me had always done. I played dead. I didn't answer, praying to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore, that he'd just give up and stumble away. But silence, to a bully, isn't a deterrent. It's gasoline. The thud against the door made me flinch. It was the sound of a shoulder. Heavy and purposeful. "I know you're in there, you stuck-up bitch." My breath caught in my throat. This was different. This wasn't his usual verbal garbage, the casual insults tossed across the dinner table. This was something coiled and ready to strike. The doorknob rattled violently, a sound like shaking bones. I heard his grunts of frustration, and then a moment of chilling silence. I knew what was coming. The explosion of the door flying off its hinges was so loud it felt like it shook the very foundation of the house. The cheap wood of the door frame splintered, and the door itself slammed against the interior wall with a deafening crack. It didn't just break a door. It shattered the last fragile illusion that I could ever be safe here. He stood there. In the ruined doorway, a hulking silhouette against the dim light of the hall. The air in the room instantly became thick, heavy with the stench of stale beer, sweat, and the electric charge of impending violence. What followed wasn't a fight. It was a hunt. It unfolded in a terrifying, almost silent waltz of violence. The only sounds were ragged breaths and the soft thud of my bare feet on the hardwood floor. He lunged, and the screwdriver glinted under the moonlight filtering through my window. My training kicked in. I sidestepped, his clumsy momentum carrying him past me. My hand shot out not to strike, but to control. My fingers tried to form a C-clamp on his wrist, to use his own weight against him. But he was bigger. He was heavier. And he was fueled by a blind, drunken rage that my disciplined training couldn't account for in this cramped space. He shook me off with a furious roar, my grip breaking easily. He swung again, and I dodged, my back hitting the wall. The cheap poster of the Andromeda Galaxy I'd had since I was 12 crinkled behind me. It was a dead end. I had nowhere else to go. I saw the third lunge coming. My hand came up to block, to parry, to do something, but I was a fraction of a second too slow. He shoved me hard against the wall, my head smacking against the drywall with a dull thud. For a dizzying, weightless moment, I was off balance. And in that moment, he struck. The final blow wasn't aimed at my face, but lower. The tip of the screwdriver connected with my right shoulder. There was no sharp slice of metal through skin. There was only a hideous, dry crack that seemed to vibrate through my entire skeleton. A sound louder than any gunshot. It was the sound of my clavicle snapping. The force of the blow drove the screwdriver through the bone and muscle, pinning my shoulder and me to the wall behind me. A scream, raw and primal, tore itself from my throat. A sound of pure, unadulterated agony that seemed to have no end. But the physical pain, as blinding as it was nothing compared to the horror that came next. Footsteps pounded down the hall. My father, Thomas, and my stepmother, Evelyn, appeared in the shattered doorway. Hope, stupid and desperate, flared in my chest. They'll help me. They have to. My eyes, wide with pain and terror, pleaded with them. It was a prayer without words. Dad, Mom, please, I'm hurt. Help me. But the eyes that looked back at me didn't belong to parents looking at their injured daughter. They belonged to spectators looking at an inconvenience. My father's face was a mask of weary resignation. He sighed, a long, put-upon sound, as if I'd just spilled milk on the carpet. Evelyn smiled. It wasn't a real smile. It was a smirk of pure, triumphant malice. A victor's grin that said, see? I told you you're nothing here. Then she spoke, and her voice was a slow, sweet poison. Oh, now Kenya, honey, she cooed, tilting her head. Don't be so dramatic. The words sucked the air from my lungs. Dramatic. The world began to tilt, the edges of my vision blurring. Through the fog of pain, I heard my father's voice, devoid of all concern, piling on the verdict. Her brother's drunk, he said to Evelyn. Not to me. She always did love the attention. And then they laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, just a low, shared chuckle of amusement between them. That sound, that soft, dismissive sound, was 1,000 times more brutal than the screwdriver in my shoulder. My father didn't just abandon me. He took the side of my attacker. He signed, sealed, and delivered the death sentence of our relationship with a laugh. Something inside me snapped. Cleaner and more final than my collarbone. My left hand, my uninjured hand, was trembling uncontrollably at my side, but it moved with a will of its own. Fighting through the waves of shock and nausea, it found the cell phone in the pocket of my pajama pants. My thumb slid across the screen, clumsy and slick with sweat. 3 letters. SOS. It wasn't just a call for help. It was a vow. In that moment, as my parents' laughter echoed in my ears, the scared, hopeful girl named Kenya died on that floor, pinned to the wall of her childhood bedroom. And from the ashes of that betrayal, Private Mac, a soldier, was born. I hit send. Not with the hope of being rescued, but with the cold, hard certainty of a sniper pulling a trigger. They would pay for this. The last thing I saw before the world faded to black wasn't my stepbrother's snarling face or the glint of the screwdriver. It was the smug, satisfied smile on my stepmother's face. The game had changed, and I had just fired the first shot. I drifted back to consciousness slowly, pulled from a deep, dark well of nothingness by a steady, rhythmic beeping. A machine. My eyes fluttered open, assaulted by the harsh, clinical glare of fluorescent lights overhead. The world was sterile, white walls, the faint smell of antiseptic, and the thin, scratchy blanket covering me. The pain in my shoulder was a dull, throbbing fire, a constant reminder of the metal, the bone, the betrayal. I was alone. Utterly and completely alone. This cold, sterile loneliness, it was a horribly familiar feeling. It was a ghost that had haunted me for years. The beeping of the heart monitor faded into the background, and the cold of the room seeped into my bones, pulling me back through time, back 4 years to a different holiday, a different room full of people where I was just as isolated. Not by white walls, but by the smiling faces of the people I called family. It was Thanksgiving. I was 15, and I was holding a miracle in my hands. It was a letter, printed on thick, cream-colored cardstock, from the University of Texas at Austin. An acceptance letter. Not for college, not yet, but for their prestigious summer astrophysics program for gifted high school students. To me, it wasn't just a letter. It was a golden ticket. It was proof, tangible and real, that the girl who was always too quiet, too studious, too much, was not useless. It was a shield against the constant barrage of Evelyn's passive aggression and Dylan's overt contempt. I kept it folded in the pocket of my jeans all day, the crisp edges a secret comfort against my thigh. The house was buzzing with the chaotic energy of a typical American Thanksgiving. The rich smell of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie spice filled the air, mingling with the scent of my Aunt Carol's overpowering perfume. In the living room, the Dallas Cowboys were playing on TV, the drone of the commentators a constant backdrop to the loud, overlapping conversations of my relatives. For a few fleeting moments, surrounded by that noise and warmth, I allowed myself a dangerous fantasy, that I belonged. That I was a part of this. Dinner was a loud affair around the oversized dining table. The turkey sat in the center, perfectly browned. Bowls of mashed potatoes, gravy, green bean casserole, and cranberry sauce were passed from hand to hand. I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs, for the perfect moment. When there was a brief lull in the conversation, I took a deep breath, pulled the letter from my pocket, and slid it across the table to my father. "Dad," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I got this in the mail." He picked it up, a flicker of confusion on his face as he read. And then, something incredible happened. He smiled. A real, genuine smile, the kind I hadn't seen directed at me in years. It reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. For a single, breathtaking second, I felt it. Pride. "Well, I'll be," he said, holding up the letter. "Evelyn, honey, read this out loud. Let everyone hear what Kenya has been up to." That was the moment the trap was sprung. Evelyn took the letter, her expression one of beaming maternal pride. She theatrically placed a pair of reading glasses on her nose, her red-painted nails tapping the paper. "Of course, dear," she chirped. She cleared her throat, commanding the attention of the entire table. "Oh, everyone, listen to this. Kenya has been accepted into the University of Texas's summer camp for cognitive special support." She delivered the line with perfect, saccharine enthusiasm. Isn't that just wonderful? We must always support her efforts, even if she is a little different. The words hung in the air for a single, silent heartbeat. My aunts and uncles exchanged confused glances. Then the dam broke. It started with a snicker from my cousin, then a nervous titter from Aunt Carol. Dylan, of course, threw his head back and roared with laughter, a loud, braying sound that filled the entire room. The dream shattered. I was frozen in my chair, the blood draining from my face. My entire world had just tilted on its axis. "No," I stammered, my voice sounding small and foreign. That's not what it says. It's for gifted and talented students in astrophysics." Evelyn looked at me, her face a perfect mask of gentle concern. She reached across the table and patted my hand. "Oh, sweetie, don't be embarrassed," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "We're proud of you no matter what." With that single, devastating sentence, she sealed my fate. She had taken my greatest achievement, the brightest star in my sky, and extinguished it, reframing it as a disability. And she did it with the loving smile of a saint. I felt the hot sting of tears welling up in my eyes. I looked desperately at my father, begging him to intervene, to correct her, to say something. But he just sat there, that rare smile gone, replaced by a tight, uncomfortable expression. He wouldn't meet my eyes. No one would. The rest of my family looked down at their plates or offered me weak, pitying smiles, fully believing Evelyn's cruel lie. A single tear escaped and rolled down my cheek, landing with a soft plop in my pile of mashed potatoes. It created a tiny, salty pool in the middle of the creamy white. That single tear was the loneliest thing in the entire world. That night, I was crying silently in my room when a soft knock came at the door. It was my father. Hope, that stubborn, foolish thing, flickered in my chest. He was here to apologize, to comfort me. But he didn't come in. He just stood in the doorway, his frame blocking the light from the hall. "You embarrassed Evelyn tonight," he said, his voice cold and flat. There was no warmth in it, no fatherly concern, just disappointment. "You know she didn't mean it. She was just trying to include you. Now you need to go out there and apologize to her for ruining the party." The words hit me harder than any physical blow. I was being ordered to apologize to the person who had just publicly humiliated me. My tears stopped. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. I looked at the man who was supposed to protect me, and I finally saw him for what he was, a coward, willing to sacrifice his own daughter for a moment's peace in his second marriage. That was the moment I learned that sometimes the deepest cuts don't leave a visible scar. If you've ever had a victory, big or small, turned into something ugly by someone who was supposed to be cheering for you, hit that like button to show some support, and comment with a simple, "I see you" below. Because we all deserve to have our light acknowledged. I didn't go out and apologize. I stayed in my room and listened to the sounds of my family laughing downstairs. Later, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, I took the acceptance letter from my desk. I looked at the proud Longhorn logo of the University of Texas, at the words that had once felt like a promise of a brighter future. Then, slowly and deliberately, I tore it into tiny, irreparable pieces. I let the confetti of my broken dreams fall into the trash can. It was on that Thanksgiving night that I truly understood. In this house, my success was worse than my failure. It was a crime. and it was a scar I would carry long after the bruises faded. I thought joining the army would be an escape. I pictured a clean break, a place where my value would be measured only by my performance, my discipline, my strength. I was wrong. The ghosts of my past didn't just follow me to basic training at Fort Jackson. They enlisted right alongside me. They wore my uniform, slept in my bunk, and screamed in my ear louder than any drill sergeant. Basic training is a shock to the system by design. It's meant to break you down and build you back up. The problem was I was already broken. The constant noise, the sleep deprivation, the physical exhaustion, that was all manageable. The real enemy was the one that lived inside my head. It happened most often on the obstacle course. We were low-crawling under barbed wire, mud seeping into our uniforms, our muscles screaming. My drill sergeant, a man whose voice was a permanent roar, got right in my face, his spit flying. "Mac, you're too damn slow. Are you weak?" In that moment, his voice faded, replaced by another, far more venomous. It was Evelyn's sickly sweet tone. The poor thing, her voice echoed in my mind. She's just not built like the other kids. She has to try twice as hard. My arms turned to lead. My movements became sluggish. Then came the climbing wall. As I slipped, my boots failing to find purchase, I didn't hear the groan of my platoon. I heard Dylan's braying laughter from that Thanksgiving. Useless. The years of their psychological warfare had installed a saboteur deep within my psyche, an inner critic more relentless than any physical enemy. It whispered their words into my ear with every push-up, every grueling march, every failed attempt. I was on the verge of quitting, of ringing that bell and admitting defeat. A terrifying thought began to take root. What if they were right all along? What if I really was a weak, attention-seeking failure? The rope was my nemesis, a thick, unforgiving braid of twine hanging from a wooden scaffold. It seemed to mock me. Day after day, I'd fail. I'd get a few feet off the ground, my arms burning, my grip slipping, and the voices would start their chorus. I'd slide back down into the dirt, the shame burning hotter than the South Carolina sun. One afternoon, after another pathetic failure, I was sitting by myself, cleaning my rifle and trying not to cry, when a shadow fell over me. I looked up to see Sergeant Ruiz. She spoke in a low, controlled voice that carried more weight than any shout. She didn't yell. She observed, her eyes sharp and dark, missing nothing. She stood there for a moment, watching me. I braced for a lecture. Instead, she knelt, picking up a small stone. "Your problem isn't in your muscles, Private," she said, her voice calm. Her gaze was direct. "It's up here." She tapped her own temple with her index finger. "Who are you fighting on that rope? Is it you, or is it some ghost you brought with you from home?" The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was so accurate it knocked the wind out of me. For the first time, I felt seen. She didn't see a failed recruit. She saw a soldier fighting a hidden war. I couldn't answer. I just stared, my throat thick with unshed tears. She held my gaze for another second, then stood. "Figure out who the real enemy is, Mac," she said, and walked away. Her words rattled around in my head for days. "A ghost you brought with you from home." She was right. I wasn't fighting the rope. I was fighting Evelyn's pity and Dylan's contempt. I was fighting the 15-year-old girl who had her dreams torn up in front of her. That weekend, during our brief, precious downtime, I escaped to the base library. It was a small, quiet sanctuary of order and knowledge. I was just browsing, looking for anything to distract myself when a book cover caught my eye, Daring Greatly, by a researcher named Breen Brown. I'd never heard of her, but the title intrigued me. I sat down and started to read. It felt like someone had cracked open my skull and laid bare my deepest fears. I read about shame, about the fear of not being good enough. I read about how true courage wasn't about being fearless, but about showing up and letting yourself be seen even when you can't control the outcome. Then I read one sentence that stopped my heart. Vulnerability is not weakness. I read it again. Vulnerability is not weakness. All my life I had been taught the opposite. Evelyn saw it as a tool. My father saw it as an inconvenience. To Dylan, it was a target. I'd come to the army seeking impenetrable armor, convinced that was the only way to be strong. But this book was telling me that the very thing I was trying to bury, my history, my hurt, my feeling of being broken, wasn't my weakness. It was the birthplace of my courage. It was a paradigm shift so profound it left me breathless. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness, I read, will we discover the infinite power of our light. A week later was our final test on the obstacle course. As I stood before the rope, my old familiar dread began to creep in. I could already hear the ghosts whispering, "You're going to fail. You're not good enough." But this time, a new voice answered them. It was quiet, but it was clear. Vulnerability is not weakness. I took a deep breath. The rough texture of the rope dug into my palms. I started to climb. My muscles screamed. The ghosts started their assault. "The poor thing," Evelyn's voice cooed. I pulled myself higher. Useless. Dylan's laughter echoed in my ears. Another pull. My knuckles were raw. No, this wasn't a climb powered by biceps and grip strength. This was a climb powered by pure, defiant will. Every upward pull was an act of rebellion. Every inch gained was me telling the ghosts from my past they had no more power over me. I wasn't the broken little girl anymore. I was a soldier. I was a fighter. When my hand finally closed over the top of the scaffold, the shouts of the other recruits faded. For a moment, it was just me, hanging between the dirt and the sky. Then the silence was broken by a single whoop from someone in my platoon, and suddenly the air erupted in cheers. I slid down the rope, my hands burning, my body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. Across the field, I saw Sergeant Ruiz. She wasn't cheering. She just watched me, and then she gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was more validation than my own father had ever given me. I had done it. I had conquered the rope. But as I stood there catching my breath amidst the celebration of my platoon, a new, unsettling question took root. I had conquered the rope, but how could I win this war when I couldn't even win the one inside my own head? The cheers of my platoon faded into a dull roar in my ears as I walked away from the rope. I had won. I had climbed the unclimbable, silenced the ghosts, and earned a moment of victory. But as I found a secluded spot on the bleachers overlooking the now empty training field, the adrenaline ebbed away, leaving behind a profound and unsettling hollowness. The victory felt like a single battle won in a war that had no end. The real enemy wasn't a rope in South Carolina. It was a permanent resident in my own mind, and that battlefield was a lonely, desolate place. I sat there, lost in thought, as the sky began to bleed from dusty blue into shades of orange and pink. The sounds of my platoon celebrating in the distant barracks only amplified my isolation. That's when I saw her. Sergeant Ruiz was walking toward me, her stride purposeful. She didn't say a word, just sat down on the bench a few feet away and handed me a cold bottle of water. The condensation was cool against my sweaty, calloused palm. We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the last rays of sun disappear. Friday night, she said finally, her voice even and calm, breaking the quiet. My place. I'm making chili if you don't have plans. I turned to look at her, completely stunned. The words were so simple, so casual, yet they felt monumental. It wasn't an order. It wasn't a condescending offer of pity. It was just an invitation. In my entire life, I couldn't remember a single time an adult had invited me to their home with such straightforward, unconditional kindness. My family's invitations were always transactions, barbed with expectations and a hidden price tag. This was different. This felt like a lifeline, thrown quietly and without fanfare. I couldn't find my voice, so I just nodded, a lump forming in my throat. On Friday evening, I stood outside her apartment door, my knuckles hovering in the air, suddenly terrified. What was I doing here? What would we even talk about? But before my anxiety could convince me to turn and run, the door opened. Sergeant Ruiz stood there, out of uniform, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans. She looked smaller somehow, more human. Hey, Mac, she said with a small smile. You found it. Come on in. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Not the sterile lemon scent of my stepmother's house, but something warm and rich and real. Cinnamon, cumin, and something else, like old books and worn leather. Her apartment was small and unassuming, but it felt lived in. A stark contrast to the perfect, magazine-ready prison I grew up in. There were no expensive paintings on the walls, just framed photos of Ruiz with her army buddies in various dusty, sun-bleached locations around the world. Souvenirs from her deployments were neatly arranged on a bookshelf, a painted Russian doll, a carved wooden elephant, a heavy-looking brass compass. A huge old German shepherd with graying fur around his muzzle lumbered over, sniffed my hand, and then leaned his entire body against my leg with a contented sigh. I instinctively started scratching him behind the ears. That's Gunnar, Ruiz said. Don't mind him. He's decided you're acceptable. She didn't pepper me with questions about my past or why I was so quiet. She just treated me like a normal person. She asked if I wanted a Coke, and we sat on her worn-out couch and talked about the most wonderfully mundane things. We complained about the Texas humidity and made fun of a cheesy action movie that was playing on her small television. Then she asked, in the most casual way, so, how are you feeling today? And the question was so genuine, so free of any agenda, that it almost made me cry. When the chili was ready, we sat at her small kitchen table. She ladled a generous amount into a thick ceramic bowl for me, followed by a hefty slice of golden brown cornbread. The chili was dark and rich, with just the right amount of spice that warmed me from the inside out. As I took the first bite, a profound realization washed over me. This was the first meal I'd eaten in years where I wasn't on high alert. I wasn't mentally rehearsing my sentences, terrified of saying the wrong thing. I wasn't analyzing every facial expression, trying to decipher the hidden meaning behind a fake smile. The silence between us wasn't the tense, judgmental quiet of my family's dinner table. It was a comfortable, easy silence, filled only by the sounds of our spoons scraping against our bowls and Gunnar snoring softly on the rug nearby. It tasted better than any Thanksgiving turkey I had ever had. After dinner, we sat out on her small front porch in a pair of old rocking chairs, watching the fireflies begin to blink on and off in the humid twilight. It was in that quiet, safe space that the words tumbled out of me before I could stop them. My family, I started, my voice barely a whisper, trembling slightly. They think I'm a disappointment. I hadn't planned on saying it. The confession just broke free from the place where I had kept it locked away for so long. Ruiz didn't respond right away. She just rocked back and forth, the chains of the chair groaning softly. I held my breath, waiting for the pity, the judgment, the awkward platitudes. But they never came. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady and clear in the darkness. The army doesn't care where you came from, Private. We care where you're going. And the people who really matter will help you get there, not hold you back. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It felt like a physical weight, one I had been carrying on my shoulders for a decade, had just been lifted. Someone believed in me without needing proof, without asking for anything in return. Before I left that night, as I stood by the door, Ruiz held out a small, black, pocket-sized notebook and a pen. If things at home get bad, she said, and her voice had shifted. It was no longer the off-duty friend, but the seasoned sergeant. It was serious, sharp, and strategic. Don't just take it. Document. Date, time, who said what, who did what. Turn your feelings into data. She met my eyes, and her gaze was intense. Data is ammunition, Mac. Never go into a fight without it. I took the notebook from her hand. It felt heavier than it should, weighted with significance. That simple piece of advice changed everything. It was a battle plan. It was a weapon. It reframed my entire existence. I was no longer a helpless victim enduring random attacks. I was a soldier, a private under her command, on an intelligence-gathering mission behind enemy lines. The war was far from over, but for the first time, I finally felt like I had a fighting chance. My first leave from basic training wasn't a homecoming. It was a tactical insertion into hostile territory. Driving back to the San Antonio suburbs, the hot, familiar dread coiled in my stomach. I clutched the small black notebook from Ruiz, a hard comfort in my duffel bag. I was a soldier now, with a strategy, but I knew the enemy within these walls was more insidious than any I might face on a battlefield. The first few days were a fragile truce, a performance of strained civility. Evelyn was sickeningly sweet, telling me how proud they were. Dylan's sullen avoidance was a blessing. My father, Thomas, was a ghost, offering vague smiles, but no eye contact. I played my part, giving non-committal answers, senses on high alert, waiting for the attack. The attack came late on the third night. A soft knock just after midnight. I knew it was her. Evelyn stood in her silk nightgown, a mask of sorrow on her face, eyes glistening with rehearsed tears, a masterclass in manipulation. "Kenya, honey," she whispered, voice cracking as she glided into my room. "It's your father," she began, dabbing at her dry eyes. "He's not doing well. Since you left, he's just lost. The doctor thinks it might be severe depression. Your absence has been really hard on him." The words were expertly aimed darts of guilt. A sickening pang hit my chest. The old Kenya, desperate for affection, wanted to believe her, to feel responsible. Responsibility, even for his pain, was a connection. I almost fell for it, almost offered my savings to fix the problem she was manufacturing. But Ruiz's voice cut through the fog. "Data is ammunition." I kept my face neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, words like stones in my mouth. "What does the doctor recommend?" Evelyn's eyes lit up. "He's recommended a special therapy program, a wonderful facility, but it's very expensive. With Dylan's troubles, money is tight." She looked at me, pleading. I didn't want to ask, but with your army salary. I held her gaze. "I'll have to think about it." The old Kenya would have agreed. The new Kenya was buying time. The next morning, I waited until they were gone. The house was finally, blessedly silent. I walked to my father's study, a room I was never allowed to enter as a child. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with fear, but with a cold, determined resolve. This wasn't snooping. It was reconnaissance. I didn't have to look hard. In the top desk drawer, under old bills, was a folder. Inside, there was no doctor's referral. Instead, a thick stack of threatening letters from the Lauberge Casino in Lake Charles, Louisiana. All addressed to Dylan. The amount he owed was truly staggering. Behind them was a final warning from our bank about the mortgage. They weren't struggling because my father was sad. They were drowning because my stepbrother was a gambling addict. The rage that filled me was cold and sharp, a focused, tactical fury. There was no depression, just a web of lies designed to bleed me dry. Data. Ammunition. That evening, I was ready. I found Evelyn in the kitchen, waiting until we were alone. My phone was in my pocket, the voice memo app already running. I was in Dad's study this morning, I began, my voice steady. I saw the letters from the casino about Dylan's debt. Evelyn's sorrowful mother persona vanished. Her face hardened, her eyes turning to steel. The mask was off. So what? She snapped, her tone low and dangerous. He's your brother. You have a responsibility to help him. What's the point of that military paycheck if you're not going to use it to take care of your family? He's not my brother, I stated calmly. And I'm not paying for his damned gambling addiction. Her eyes narrowed. The fake sweetness was completely gone, replaced by pure venom. You think you're so much better than us now, in your little uniform? She stepped closer, her voice a low, venomous hiss. Don't you forget who raised you. You will regret being so ungrateful, Kenya. I'll make sure of it. I didn't flinch. I just stood there. When she was done, I turned and walked away. In my pocket, my phone had captured every single word. Click. My first piece of hard evidence. My refusal detonated a Cold War. Dylan, no longer hiding his resentment, began a campaign of petty sabotage. He'd accidentally knock over my coffee onto my book. He'd use up all the hot water before my shower. They were childish, pathetic acts of aggression, relentless, and designed to wear me down. I said nothing. I just documented everything. The final straw came a few days before my leave was over. I went to my closet for my spare dress uniform, the one I kept meticulously pressed and cared for. It was my pride, a symbol of everything I had accomplished on my own. It wasn't there. A cold dread washed over me. I searched my room, and then I found it. It had been thrown in a heap in the corner of Dylan's closet, crumpled into a ball, covered in dust and what looked like a smear of grease. It was a deliberate act of desecration, a silent, unambiguous message. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I calmly took out my phone, my hands perfectly steady. I took a photo of the uniform, crumpled and stained on the floor. I took a close-up of the grease smear. Then I picked it up and walked back to my room, closing the door behind me. My arsenal was growing. The Cold War was at its breaking point. My quiet defiance, my refusal to be their ATM, was a simmering insult to Dylan's fragile ego. The petty sabotage wasn't working. I wasn't breaking. So he decided to escalate, to burn me to the ground, symbolically. I had just gotten back from a run, feeling strong, clear-headed. As I reached for the back door, he stepped out from the garage, blocking my path. His eyes were bloodshot, his face a twisted sneer, the air thick with the smell of cheap beer. You're not going to give me the money, are you? He slurred, his voice a low growl. It was an accusation, not a question. I didn't take the bait. I told you, Dylan, I'm not paying for your mistakes. A dark, manic grin spread across his face. Fine, he's fat, then I'll just take something else of yours. Before I could react, he shoved past me and stormed into the house. A cold shock of adrenaline shot through me. I sprinted after him, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Dylan, what are you doing? I followed him to my bedroom. The door was wide open. He was at my closet, pulling out the one thing he knew was sacred to me, not my laptop, not my books. He was pulling out the heavy garment bag that held my Army service uniform, my Class A uniform. It wasn't just a set of clothes. It was a testament, earned through blood, sweat, and tears. The crisp blue fabric, the polished brass buttons, the gleaming metals, the sharp creases I'd spent hours perfecting. It was the symbol of my escape, my new identity, my honor. It was the physical manifestation of the oath I had sworn, not just to my country, but to myself. Dylan, stop. I screamed, raw panic rising in my throat. Don't you touch that. He just laughed, a wild, unhinged sound that echoed in the small room. He turned, holding the uniform like a trophy, his eyes filled with a triumphant hatred. This is what you care about, right? This stupid costume. He bolted from the room, heading for the back door. I ran after him, my mind screaming. Out into the glaring Texas sun of the backyard he went, dragging the garment bag behind him. He ripped the uniform out and threw it onto the yellowing grass. Just then, the sliding glass door to the patio opened, and Evelyn and my father stepped out. They didn't look alarmed. They didn't move to intervene. They looked like spectators who had paid for front row seats to a show. Dylan saw his audience, and his cruelty swelled. He puffed out his chest and shouted, his voice carrying across the neighboring fences. Hey, everybody, come and see the little soldier girl and her clown suit. The piece of trash who thinks she's too good for her own family. My blood ran cold. I started to lunge forward, a desperate, primal need to save my uniform. But a hand clamped down hard on my upper arm, holding me back. It was my father. I turned to him, my eyes pleading. Dad, stop him, please. He just shook his head. His face a mask of weary resignation. He wouldn't even look at me. He looked at the uniform on the ground. Just let him be, Kenya, he said, his voice flat. It's just a set of clothes. The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. In that single sentence, he invalidated everything I was, everything I had fought to become. He erased my struggle, my sacrifice, my pride. Dylan grabbed the red plastic gas can by the lawnmower. The sharp, nauseating smell of gasoline filled the air as he poured it over the dark blue jacket, soaking the fabric I had cared for so meticulously. He splashed it over the medals, the ribbons, the rank insignia. No, I screamed, struggling against my father's grip, but he held me fast. Then Dylan pulled out a matchbook. He struck a match. The small flame flickered in the sunlight, a tiny, terrible star. He tossed it. The world erupted in a whoosh of orange and black. The fire exploded to life, a hungry, roaring beast. It devoured the uniform instantly. I watched in horror as the flames licked at the fabric, curling the edges into black ash. I saw the colorful ribbons on the chest blister and melt into unrecognizable plastic slag. The very symbol of my honor was being consumed in a bonfire of his jealous rage right in front of me. I stopped struggling. I just watched it burn. I tore my eyes away from the fire and looked at my parents. They weren't smiling, but their eyes were filled with a quiet, sickening satisfaction. The look of bullies who had finally dragged their victim down to their level. In their minds, they had just won. In that instant, something inside me shifted. The hot, frantic panic was washed away by a wave of something terrifyingly calm. The tears in my eyes evaporated. The screams died in my throat. A profound, glacial stillness settled over me. I turned my head slowly and looked directly at my father, whose hand was still clamped around my arm. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke each word with a cold, deliberate precision, the sound cutting through the crackle of the flames like shards of ice. Let me go. He blinked, startled by my tone. Now, there was something in my voice, a finality he had never heard before, that made him flinch. His grip loosened, and he let go. I walked forward, my steps even and measured, until I stood just a few feet from the smoldering, blackened ruin on the grass. Dylan was still standing there, a smug, victorious smirk on his face. I didn't look at the ashes. I looked right into his eyes. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I spoke just loudly enough for all three of them to hear every single word clearly. This is the last time, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. The absolute last time any of you will touch what is mine. The last time you will disrespect me. The war you wanted? You've got it. Then I turned my back on them. On the ashes of my uniform, on the entire toxic wasteland of my childhood. I walked back into the house, up the stairs to my room, and locked the door behind me. I pulled out my phone. My hands were perfectly steady. I sent a short, encrypted text to Sergeant Ruiz. Need to talk. Urgent. If you have ever had a final straw, a line crossed that changed absolutely everything, show your support by hitting the like button and let's stand together by commenting line crossed below. The Cold War was over. The hot war was about to begin. And I finally realized that the attack in the backyard was just a prelude. The main assault was coming tonight. That was the night Dylan would come for me with a screwdriver. That was the night it all truly began. Locked in my room, the smell of gasoline and burnt fabric still clinging to the air, I stared at the single word that flashed on my phone screen, acknowledged. The reply from Sergeant Ruiz was immediate. A beacon of calm in the chaotic aftermath of the fire. My heart was still hammering against my ribs, but the cold resolve that had settled over me in the backyard was hardening into something solid, something strategic. The shaking in my hands had stopped. I was no longer a daughter in shock. I was a soldier awaiting orders. My phone rang less than 5 minutes later. The caller ID read Ruiz A. I took a deep breath and answered. Mac. There was no preamble, no gentle, how are you doing? Her voice was crisp, professional, and all business. It was exactly what I needed. Situation report, private, she commanded. In a low, steady voice, I gave her the facts. I reported the incident in the backyard as if I were describing an enemy engagement. I detailed the destruction of my Class A uniform, the presence of my parents as complicit witnesses, and the final, unambiguous threat in Evelyn's voice from the night before. I recounted the years of manipulation, the financial extortion, the systematic campaign to undermine my confidence. I told her about the evidence I had collected, the voice memo, the photographs of the ruined uniform, the gambling debts. I spoke for 10 minutes straight, uninterrupted. When I finished, there was a brief silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, slow and controlled. Good, she finally said. And the single word was a validation of everything I had done. You have your ammunition. Now you need a general. Write this down. I grabbed the black notebook she had given me. David Chin. He's with an organization in Austin called the Warriors Aegis. It's a pro bono legal group for veterans. Chin is a former JAG prosecutor. He's tough, he's smart, and he doesn't lose. Tell him Elena Ruiz sent you. And Mac, her voice grew even more serious. From this moment on, you do not engage with them alone. All contact goes through your lawyer. Understood. Huh, I replied, the military affirmation coming naturally to my lips. I had my mission. The next day, I drove to Austin. The office of the Warriors Aegis was in an old, unassuming brick building downtown. The kind with creaky wooden floors and the faint smell of old paper. It wasn't flashy, but it felt solid, serious. David Chin was a compact Asian American man in his late 40s. He was smaller than I expected, dressed in a sharp suit, but his presence filled the room. He had the sharp, intelligent eyes of a hawk, and they missed nothing. He shook my hand firmly. "Sergeant Ruiz called ahead," he said, his voice direct. He gestured for me to sit. "She holds you in high regard." He didn't ask me how I was feeling or waste time with pleasantries. He got straight to the point. "Show me your evidence." This was a language I understood. I laid out my file on his polished mahogany desk. The voice recording of Evelyn's threat, the time-stamped photos of my desecrated uniform, the copies of Dylan's gambling debts from the Louisiana casino, the bank statements showing the money I had sent them under duress. I presented it all in chronological order, a cold, hard litany of my family's crimes. He examined each piece of evidence in complete silence, his expression unreadable. He put on a pair of reading glasses to study the fine print on the bank statements. He played the audio file, listening intently, his head cocked to one side. The silence stretched on, thick with tension. My own hope hung in the balance. Finally, he took off his glasses and looked up at me. He nodded slowly, a single, decisive gesture. "This is more than enough," he said, his voice laced with a quiet intensity that sent a jolt of relief through me. "We have a case." For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt a flicker of genuine hope. It wasn't just my pain anymore. It was a case. It was real. It was something that could be fought and won. "They are bullies," Private Mac, Chin continued, steepling his fingers. "And bullies only understand one thing, a superior show of force. We are not going to file a police report. Not yet. That's a messy public battle. We are going to set a trap. A Trojan horse." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with strategic brilliance. "They want money, so we're going to let them think they're about to get a windfall." He laid out the plan, and it was as audacious as it was terrifying. "You're going to call them. You will tell them that you've reconsidered, that you were wrong, and that you will agree to help with Dylan's debt. You will offer to sign the paperwork to leverage the equity in the house, the portion your father left you in his will, but," he held up a finger, "the signing will not happen at a bank. It will happen here, in this conference room. That will be our kill box." My blood ran cold at the thought. Go back there, face them again, lie to their faces. It felt impossible. But then I looked at David Chin, at the unwavering confidence in his eyes, and I remembered who I was. I was a soldier. This was my assignment. That evening, I sat in my car in a quiet parking lot, my heart pounding. It was time to deploy the bait. I took a few deep breaths, summoning every ounce of acting ability I possessed. I thought about the scared 15-year-old girl at the Thanksgiving table. I channeled all of that vulnerability into my voice and dialed Evelyn's number. She picked up on the second ring. "What do you want, Kenya?" she answered, her voice cold and hostile. I let out a shaky, manufactured sob. "Mom," I choked out, hating the word as it left my lips. "I've been thinking, and you were right." I sniffled, making it sound as pathetic as possible. "Family is everything. I was wrong to be so selfish. I'll sign the papers. I'll do whatever it takes to help." There was a stunned silence on the other end. I could almost hear the greedy gears turning in her head. Then her voice, dripping with false, syrupy sweetness, came floating down the line. "Oh, Kenya, honey, I knew you'd do the right thing. Your father will be so relieved. You're such a good girl." The praise that I had once craved now turned my stomach. My legal advisor for my military benefits said he needs to oversee the signing," I added, repeating the script Chin had given me. "We have to do it at his office in Austin." "Of course, honey, whatever you need," she chirped, completely oblivious. She didn't question it for a second. Greed had made her blind. They had taken the bait. The trap was set. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the performance. I took a deep, steady breath. I was walking back into the fire, back into the war zone. But this time, I wasn't going in alone. And this time, I was the one holding all the weapons. The day of the meeting, I felt a strange and profound calm. It wasn't the absence of fear, but a clarity that pushed fear into the background. I was a soldier walking into a planned engagement. I knew the terrain. I knew the objective. And I had superior firepower. I wore my Class A uniform, the replacement I had painstakingly acquired, not as armor, but as a statement. When I walked into David Chen's conference room, I was not Kenya, the broken daughter. I was Private Mac, United States Army. I was there first, seated beside Chen at the head of a long, polished conference table. He was a picture of professional calm, arranging files with meticulous precision. Across the room, in a chair in the corner, sat a uniformed Austin police officer, a woman with a calm but watchful demeanor. And by the window, looking out over the city, stood an older man with a kind face and sad eyes. Mr. Miller, my former next-door neighbor, a retired cop. The pieces were in place. Then the door opened, and they walked in, the victors arriving to claim their prize. They were beaming, radiating a smug, triumphant energy that was almost suffocating. Dylan was practically bouncing on the balls of his feet, already spending the money in his head. "Going to get me a new truck," he whispered loudly to my father, who clapped him on the back. Evelyn glided over to me, her face a mask of maternal pride. She placed a hand on my uniformed shoulder. "I'm so proud of you, Kenya. I knew you'd come around." The touch felt like a spider crawling on my skin, but I didn't flinch. I just looked past her, my face a blank slate. They took their seats opposite us, their greed making them oblivious. They didn't notice the police officer in the corner or pay any mind to the older man by the window. They just saw the stack of papers in front of Chin, the documents they believed held their salvation. I sat in silence, my back ramrod straight. I waited for my general to begin the assault. "Good afternoon," Chin began, his voice smooth and professional. He pushed a single document across the table. "This is the proposed agreement to leverage Ms. Mack's equity in the property." He let them look at it, savoring their moment of triumph. However, he continued, his tone shifting slightly, becoming sharper. "Before we proceed, we have a few supplementary materials to review as part of our due diligence." He picked up a remote. The large screen on the wall, previously dark, flickered to life. The first image that appeared was a high-resolution photograph of my class A uniform, smoldering in a blackened heap on the grass. Dylan snorted, a laugh rumbling in his chest. "Oh, come on. That was just a joke. Lighten up." Chin didn't acknowledge him. He clicked the remote again. The next image was a close-up of the collection letters from the Lauberge Casino. Dylan's name and the staggering amount owed clearly visible. The smile on Dylan's face began to falter. Click. A copy of the bank statement showing the wire transfer from my account to theirs. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The smug atmosphere in the room was rapidly evaporating, being replaced by a thick, cold tension. And finally, Chin said, putting the remote down and picking up a small digital audio player. He pressed a button, and Evelyn's voice, cold and venomous, filled the silent conference room. "You think you're so much better than us now, don't you? In your little uniform. You will regret being so ungrateful, Kenya. I'll make sure of it." The color drained from Evelyn's face. She looked like she had been slapped. That's illegal," she stammered, her voice a shrill squeak. "You recorded me without my permission." A thin, cold smile touched David Chen's lips. "Actually, ma'am, in the state of Texas, we operate under one-party consent, and Private Mac consented. So it's perfectly admissible. That's when the dam broke. You little bitch." Dylan roared, slamming his fists on the table and lunging to his feet. "I'll kill you." Instantly, the police officer was out of her chair, her hand resting firmly on the butt of her holstered Glock. "Sit down," she commanded, her voice ringing with authority. "Now." Dylan froze, his face purple with rage, and slowly, shakily sank back into his seat. My father looked like he was about to faint. Chin let the tension hang in the air for a moment longer before gesturing towards the man by the window, who now turned to face the room. "And this," Chin said, his voice calm and steady, "is Mr. Miller. I believe you know him. He was your neighbor for 15 years. He's also a retired detective with the San Antonio PD." Evelyn and Thomas stared at him, their faces a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. Recognition dawned. "Mr. Miller," Chin continued, "was in his yard on the day of the joke. He is prepared to testify under oath about witnessing Dylan's verbal threats, the act of arson, and your presence as complicit, and, I quote, cheering spectators. It was over. I could see it in their eyes. The fight had gone out of them, replaced by the stark, cold terror of cornered animals." Evelyn stared at Thomas, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. They had lost, and they knew it. Chin let the silence stretch, letting the weight of their defeat crush them. Then he slid a different set of documents across the table. It was 2 pages, bound with a simple staple. "You have 2 options," he said, his voice now like steel. "Option 1. I take this entire file, the audio, the photos, the financial records, and Mr. Miller's sworn testimony, and I walk it down the hall to the district attorney's office. Dylan will face felony charges for assault and arson. You and your husband," he looked directly at Evelyn, "will face charges for conspiracy and felony fraud. You will all likely do jail time." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Or there is option 2. He tapped the 2-page document. "You sign this agreement. It states that you relinquish all and any claim to the house, transferring the deed entirely to Private Mac. You will vacate the premises within 30 days. Furthermore, you will sign a legally binding no-contact order. You will never again attempt to contact, harass, or approach Private Mac in any way, shape, or form for the rest of your lives." 30 days. On the 31st day, I stood alone in the doorway of my childhood home, new key in hand. The moving truck had rumbled away the afternoon before, a final, unceremonious departure. The house was mine, and it was terrifyingly silent. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing on the bare hardwood floors. The silence was a physical presence, a heavy blanket over everything. They had taken all the furniture, leaving ghosts behind. Faded squares on the walls marked where Evelyn's curated family photos, the ones that never included me, had once hung. It was as if they had never been here, yet their presence was everywhere. I made my way to my old bedroom, the scene of the attack. My hand went instinctively to the wall by the doorframe. There it was, a small, deep indentation in the drywall, a permanent scar from Dylan's screwdriver. I traced its outline with my finger. I had won legally. I was the victor. I owned the house, and they were gone, bound by a no-contact order. But standing there, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like the ceasefire after a brutal war. The fighting was over, but the battlefield was scarred, and the cost had been immense. The last few weeks had been a blur of logistics and paperwork. Chin had handled everything with ruthless efficiency. They had signed the papers in his office without another word, their faces pale and drawn. They had packed under the watchful eye of a court-appointed supervisor. There were no dramatic confrontations, no final showdowns. They had simply vanished from my life, leaving a vast, echoing emptiness in their wake. I walked down to the kitchen and sat on the floor, my back against the cool cabinets. Forgiveness. The word had been rolling around in my head for days. I thought of my grandfather reading to me from his worn Bible on the porch in Corpus Christi. I remembered a line he often quoted, the words of Jesus on the cross, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." As a child, I thought it was about their ignorance. Now I understood it wasn't about them at all. Forgiveness wasn't an act of absolution for the guilty. It was an act of liberation for the wounded. It wasn't about excusing their actions. It was about refusing to let their poison continue to run through my veins. It was about my own peace. I knew I couldn't call my father. A phone call would be an invitation for more manipulation. So instead, I found a pen and a single sheet of paper in a drawer. I sat at the empty kitchen counter where he used to read the paper every morning, and I wrote him one final letter. I didn't accuse him. I didn't list his failures. I just told him my truth. "Dad," I wrote, "I think I spent my entire life trying to earn a single genuine smile from you. Just one. But on the night I needed you the most, the night I was bleeding in my own room, the smile you gave was for them. You chose your comfort over your daughter. I am done trying to earn something that you are incapable of giving." My hand paused, the pen hovering over the paper. Then I finished it. "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to be free from the weight of hating you. I deserve peace. Goodbye, Dad." I folded the letter, wrote his name on it, and left it on the counter. It was a message in a bottle, cast out into an ocean I would never visit again. That was my farewell. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a notification, a new voicemail. It was my father's number. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the delete button. The soldier in me screamed at me to erase it, to not let the poison back in. But the little girl inside me, the one who still foolishly hoped, had to know. I pressed play. His voice was a broken, trembling thing I had never heard before, thick with tears. Kenny, I got your letter. I'm so sorry. I was weak. I was a coward. Evelyn, she had so much control. It was easier to just go along. I never wanted to hurt you. Please, just give me one more chance to make it right. Just one chance. I listened to it once, then again. The little girl inside me wept, wanting to run back, wanting to believe this broken man could be the father she always wanted. But the soldier stood firm. The soldier saw the truth. His apology wasn't for me. It was for him. It was littered with excuses. I was weak. I was a coward. She had control. Weakness was a reason, not an excuse. He was sorry he got caught, not sorry for what he did. It was just another tactic, another form of manipulation wrapped in remorse. I had chosen myself in the lawyer's office. Now I had to choose myself again. My thumb moved deliberately across the screen. I pressed delete. The voicemail vanished. I had finally chosen myself completely and irrevocably. The healing began a week later, not with therapy or quiet reflection, but with the loud, cheerful chaos of friendship. Sergeant Ruiz showed up on a Saturday morning in a pickup truck. 2 other soldiers from my platoon with her, armed with paint rollers, toolboxes, and a stack of pizzas. "Thought you could use some reinforcements, Private," Ruiz said with a grin. For the first time, genuine laughter filled the rooms of that house. We worked all weekend, scraping old paint, patching holes, the sounds of our work and easy camaraderie chasing away the lingering ghosts. We turned the house from a mausoleum of painful memories into a blank canvas. Then I began to reclaim the territory. Dylan's old room, the source of so much resentment, was the first to go. I painted the walls a calm, steady gray and filled it with weight benches and a treadmill. It became my home gym, a place of strength and discipline. My father's study, the room I was never allowed to enter, became my library. I filled the shelves with books, turning a space of secrets and lies into a haven of knowledge and peace. The act of rebuilding the house was the act of rebuilding my soul. With every coat of fresh paint, I was covering over a scar. With every room I repurposed, I was taking back a piece of my own history and rewriting it. I was transforming a prison built by others into a sanctuary I was building for myself. It was slow. It was hard. But for the first time, it felt like coming home. Years have passed. The house that was once a battlefield is now a sanctuary, filled with the warmth of sunlight and the quiet hum of a life rebuilt. The ghosts have long since been evicted, replaced by the comforting presence of well-worn books and the easy laughter of friends. The little girl who was once pinned to a wall is gone. In her place stands a woman, a sergeant in the United States Army. Me. Sometimes, in the quiet moments of the morning, before I put on my uniform, I'll stand in front of the mirror and look at my right shoulder. The scar is still there. It's a pale, silvery line against my skin now, faded with time, but it will never truly disappear. And I am grateful for that. For years, I saw it as a mark of shame, a brand of my family's betrayal. But I don't see it that way anymore. I've come to realize that this scar is the most important medal I have ever earned. It wasn't awarded to me in a ceremony. It was forged in fire and pain. It's not a symbol of my weakness. It's a permanent reminder of the war I survived, of the moment I chose to fight back, of the strength I never knew I had. It is my scar of honor. And it tells a story I was finally ready to share. I knew my story couldn't end with me, safe within the newly painted walls of my home. The weapons that David Chin and Sergeant Ruiz had given me, strategy, data, and a voice, were too powerful to keep to myself. I started working with Chen and the Warriors Aegis, volunteering on weekends. Together, we established a new outreach program, a specialized branch aimed directly at service members trapped in the silent horror of domestic abuse. We called it Operation Open Eyes. Our mission is simple: to help soldiers and veterans recognize the signs of abuse, to provide them with the legal and psychological resources to fight back, and to show them that they are not alone. I became one of its lead advocates. The voice that was once silenced by fear now echoes in auditoriums and conference rooms at military bases across the country. I stand on stages in front of young men and women in uniform, and I tell them my story. I tell them about the gaslighting, the manipulation, the violence. I show them that abuse doesn't always wear the face of a monster. Sometimes it wears the face of family. And I teach them how to turn their pain into data, their fear into a strategy, and their silence into a testimony. The work is my purpose. It's the legacy I am building, not on a foundation of anger, but of resilience. But my strength isn't just forged in the present. It's rooted in the past. And so, once a year, on the anniversary of my grandfather's passing, I make a pilgrimage. I drive the long, flat highway south to Corpus Christi. The air grows thick and salty as I get closer to the coast, a smell that has always felt like coming home. Elena Ruiz always comes with me. She never asks why this trip is so important. She just knows. She's no longer my sergeant. She's my family. The kind you choose, the kind that shows up. We walk along the same stretch of beach where my grandfather taught me about the strength of the sand dollars all those years ago. I no longer need to search for the perfect shell. I don't need to hold it in my hand to feel his strength anymore, because I finally understand that he wasn't talking about the shell. He was talking about me. His strength is a part of me now, woven into the very fabric of my being. I stand at the edge of the water, letting the warm Gulf waves wash over my bare feet, and I talk to him in the whisper of the tide. I'm still fighting, Grandpa, I say to the endless blue horizon. And I'm winning. That is the story I carry with me. That is the legacy I share. And it all culminates in moments like this. I'm standing on a stage at Fort Jackson, the same base where I nearly broke. The auditorium is filled with hundreds of new recruits. Their face is a mixture of pride, excitement, and a deep underlying fear. They're so young. They remind me of myself. I look out at them, and then I look directly into the camera that is live streaming my speech to thousands more across the world. I raise my hand and gently touch the scar on my shoulder, a gesture that has become my signature. They tried to pin me to a wall, I say, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the microphone. They tried to define me with their words, their anger, and their violence. They tried to break me, but all they did was set me free. I let my eyes travel across the sea of young faces, meeting as many of their gazes as I can. Real strength isn't about never falling. It isn't about never feeling weak or scared. Real strength is what happens when you have been pinned down, when you have been betrayed, when you have been abandoned by the very people who are supposed to protect you, and you still find a way to send out your signal. I lean closer to the microphone, my voice dropping to a more intimate, personal tone, speaking not just to the room, but to every single person listening in every corner of the world. If you are hearing this right now and you feel pinned down, if you feel trapped in a battle that no one else can see, I want you to know that you are not fighting alone. Your signal has been received. In the comment section of this video, I want you to do one simple thing. I want you to write, "I see you." That's it. No story, no explanation, unless you want to share. Just, "I see you." Let's create a signal flare so bright that it lights up the dark corners of the world. Let's show everyone who is fighting in silence that an entire army is here ready to fight with them. Because no one deserves to fight alone. Sharing my full story, from the darkest moments to the dawn, has been a vital part of my own healing. I want to sincerely thank you for listening. Take care. Good luck.